The western sun scorched down on the dusty little town like it was trying to burn it off the map. Dust swirled thick in the air as the stagecoach creaked its way toward the station. Elias Ward stood alone on the wooden platform, gripping a letter with smeared ink. Tucked inside was the photo of a blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman, his mail-order bride. The one he had waited for through the long, lonely winter. Elias's heart pounded like a drum. He had rehearsed his greeting 100 times over. Every lonesome night, he lit his lantern and stared at that photograph, dreaming of a new family taking root in this unforgiving land. The stagecoach wheels screeched and came to a stop. The door swung open. But instead of a delicate figure, out stepped a woman entirely different. She was tall and broad-shouldered, like a warrior. Her thick black hair was tied back tight. Her skin was the color of burnished copper, her deep black eyes scanning the crowd with sharp caution. She wore a deerskin coat the color of dry earth, hugging a powerful frame. One sleeve was torn, and dark blood had soaked into her right side. In her arms, she clutched a wooden box carved with swirling cloud patterns, holding it like her very soul depended on it. The small crowd at the station froze. Curious, uneasy stares cut through the silence. Elias furrowed his brow, glancing at the letter in his hand, then back at the woman before him. She was not the gentle German girl from the photograph. This was a giant Apache woman, standing lost at the edge of the frontier. The wind kicked up another cloud of dust, sweeping away every word Elias had practiced. Only one question rang out in his head. Why in God's name did the Lord send the wrong woman to my doorstep? And if it were you in Elias's boots, what would you feel in that moment? Let me know down in the comments. Elias stood frozen, the letter trembling softly in his hand. On the paper, the handwriting from the marriage agency remained his name, the name of the blonde-haired German girl, and a promise of a new life. But the woman standing before him, tall, powerful, her gaze slicing through the crowd like a blade, made all of it seem meaningless. The stagecoach driver hopped down, brushed the dust off his coat, and shook his head with a mutter. Some kind of paperwork mix-up. I just haul passengers, do not know a thing. Then he climbed back onto the coach, cracked his whip, and rolled away like he wanted no part of whatever this was. The Apache woman said nothing. She stood still, soft leather shoes resting on the wooden boards, the carved wooden box pressed tight to her chest. Her face was resolute, carved with the rugged lines of the mountains. Her eyes scanned the crowd, as though waiting for someone to call her name. Elias tried to speak, but the greeting he had rehearsed 100 times to welcome his German bride caught in his throat. All he could do was step forward, holding out the letter. My name is Elias Ward. I was expecting someone else. The woman lifted her eyes black as coal pits and looked straight at him. Then, without a word, she reached into her coat and pulled out another piece of paper covered in strange, curling symbols that looked more like drawings than writing. Her long finger pointed to the paper, then to herself. Softly, she spoke a single sound that floated like smoke. Anaba. A murmur rose from the crowd. Samuel Crow, the general store owner, stepped off his porch, planting his hands on his hips as he glanced from Elias to the woman. Ward, what is going on here? That is not the girl you have been writing to for the past 8 months. This here's trouble. Elias felt heat rising in his chest. A mix of disappointment and confusion churned inside him. And yet, there was something else, something that kept him from looking away. The torn sleeve of her deerskin coat caught the sunlight, revealing a dark, damp stain of blood not yet dry. The woman shifted slightly, angling the wooden box behind her as if to shield it from sight. Samuel followed Elias's eyes and frowned. You see that? She is hurt. Might be best to take her over to Dr. Miller's. But the moment she heard the word doctor, Anaba shook her head violently. Her eyes flared with fear. She stepped back, clutching the box tighter, her breath quickening. Every move she made screamed the same message. Do not touch it. Do not take the box. Elias stood still. Part of him wanted to turn and walk away, to tell himself this was someone else's mistake, not his burden to carry. But another part, a deeper part, shaped by loss and carved by injustice, whispered that he could not just leave her. A wave of dry heat swept through, kicking up a cloud of red dust. And in that moment, Elias Ward understood. This stagecoach had not just brought a stranger. It had brought him a fate he could not escape. Elias had no time to think before heavy footsteps echoed down the dusty street. From the haze at the far end of town, a broad-shouldered figure emerged. Marshal Grady, the man tasked with keeping the peace in this place. He wore a long black coat, a silver star gleaming on his chest, but his eyes were dull and murky, holding more greed than justice. "Ward," Grady called out, his voice rough from too many cigars. "Heard you were waiting on a bride, but looks like the wrong cargo showed up." He squinted at Annaba, then curled his lip. "An Apache. Built like a man. I do not care where you take her, but she is not staying here." Annaba did not understand the words, but the tone said enough. She clutched the wooden box tighter and stepped back toward Elias. A small gesture, but one that told him she was choosing him as her anchor in a world that did not welcome her. "Marshal, it might just be a paperwork mistake," Elias said, trying to keep his voice calm. "She is hurt. She needs a place to rest." Grady snorted. "A mistake, huh? You hear about Copper Creek? 2 days ago, $3,000 gone from the bank. Witness says the ringleader was a red-skinned woman." He gritted his teeth and narrowed his eyes at Annaba. "Maybe I just found her." Elias froze. 2 days? No one could ride from Copper Creek to here that fast unless they had wings. His eyes dropped to Grady's hands. The knuckles were swollen and red, fresh scratch marks across his skin, a tear in his vest. Then it hit him like a lightning bolt in a dry prairie storm. It was not the bride who had something to hide. It was the lawman. Samuel Crow stepped forward, gripping his hunting rifle tight. "Grady, that story does not add up. This woman just stepped off the stagecoach." Grady snarled. "Back off, old man. I am checking that box she will not let go of. Bet my badge there is stolen gold inside." Annaba understood enough. Her eyes darkened, and she clutched the box as if it held her heart. She let out a stream of Apache words, trembling, but steady. Elias could not grasp the meaning, but the fear in her voice rang clear. His heart pounded. He knew that once Grady got his hands on that box, things would spin out of control. 2 choices echoed in his mind: walk away and stay safe, or step forward and do what a real cowboy would do. Elias took a slow breath, his fingers brushing the handle of the Colt at his side. He stepped between the marshal and the towering woman behind him. "Grady," he said, voice low and firm. "No one touches her while I am standing here." The wooden planks beneath their boots creaked in the hot wind. Destiny had drawn its line in the sand, and Elias Ward knew, from this moment on, he was bound to the fate of the strange Apache woman. The entire stagecoach station seemed to hold its breath after Elias spoke. Marshal Grady glared hard, but with townsfolk still gathered around, he did not dare make a move. He spat on the ground and growled, "You will regret this, Ward. A man who stands against the law does not live long." With that, he turned on his heel, his black coat vanishing into the swirling dust. Only when the sound of his boots had faded did Elias turn back to Annaba. The Apache woman had not moved, still holding the wooden box tight in both arms. The bloodstain on her coat had darkened under the fading afternoon light. "Sit down," Elias said gently. "Let me look at that wound." He motioned with his hands, tapping his own side, then gestured to the porch step. At first, Annaba shook her head, eyes filled with distrust. She had known too well the betrayal of white men to place her faith easily. But then, sensing no force behind Elias's words, she slowly sat down. Elias reached into the leather pouch at his side, pulling out a clean strip of cloth and a bottle of whiskey. As he touched the torn sleeve, Annaba flinched. He whispered, "Easy now. I am not taking your box." She gave a faint nod and let out a breath. Elias carefully soaked the cloth in whiskey and cleaned the wound. Beneath the dried blood, a long, clean gash came into view, sharp as if cut by a blade. This was no accident from a bumpy stage ride. This was the mark of an attack. As he worked, the box in Annaba's arms shifted slightly, just enough to let him glimpse inside. It was not gold or silver as Grady had claimed, but a copper bracelet etched with tribal markings, and a bundle of corn and bean seeds, wrapped with care in rough cloth. Elias froze. This was not stolen treasure. This was life. This was heritage. Annaba quickly drew the box back to her chest, but in that brief instant, her eyes met his. No longer filled with doubt, there was a flicker of trust there. Fragile, but real. Elias wrapped the bandage tight around her side and tied it off. "There," he said. "Not pretty, but it will stop the bleeding." He stepped back and added, "You do not need to be afraid of me." Annaba stared at him. Then, for the first time, her lips formed a broken English word. Thank you. Just 2 syllables, but they warmed something deep in Elias's chest. He sat down across from her, watching this towering woman hold that wooden box as if it carried her past, her people, and everything she believed in. In that moment, Elias understood he was no longer caught in a simple letter-writing mistake. He had stepped into something far greater, the story of an Apache woman, and the secret she carried with her. Thank you for spending this moment with me. If this story brought back memories of dusty evenings, echoing hoofbeats, and the spirit of the Old West, consider subscribing to the channel. So each day, we can sit together again. And I will tell you another story from the frontier. Evening fell over the town, the sunlight glowing red like forged steel. Elias was just about to help Annaba into Samuel's store for rest, when a thunder of hooves rang out from the end of the dusty road. A group of riders appeared, 6, maybe 7, shrouded in a haze of dust. At the front, no surprise, rode Marshal Grady. A wicked grin stretched across his face. "Ward," he bellowed, "I told you not to stand in the way of the law. You didn't listen. Now I'm here to finish it." Horses neighed, steel clashed against leather, and the glint of gun barrels caught the fading light. They formed a half-circle, closing in around the stage station. The few townsfolk quickly scattered, not daring to intervene. Samuel stood firm on the porch of his store, hunting rifle in hand, eyes drawn tight like a bowstring. Annaba shivered slightly, clutching the wooden box to her chest. Elias could feel her breath growing rapid, but in those deep black eyes, there was no more fear, only the wild gleam of an animal cornered and ready to strike. Grady raised his hand and gave the order. "Search her. Get that box. It doesn't leave this town." In a flash, Elias understood if they got through, Annaba would lose everything. His eyes darted around, the empty station platform, a few support posts, and a large water barrel beside the porch. An idea sparked. He stepped slowly onto the wooden boards, one hand resting on the handle of his Colt. "Grady," he said, voice steady as stone. "You talk about the law, but who holds you accountable? No witness saw her at Copper Creek, but your scratched-up hands?" Elias gave a crooked smile. "They tell a different story." Grady's eyes flared with fury. "You talk too much, Ward. Get him." 3 riders charged forward. At that moment, Elias turned and fired. The shot did not aim at a man, it hit the water barrel beside the porch. The wooden barrel exploded, sending a rush of water spilling across the red dust road. Horses reared and screamed, their hooves slipping wildly in the sudden mud. Riders crashed to the ground, swearing as chaos erupted. Samuel wasted no time. He raised his rifle and fired a warning shot into the air. "That's enough, Grady. We all know who the real Liar Island." In the confusion, Elias pulled Annaba behind a freight wagon, shielding her with his body. Her breath burned hot against his ear, and the box stayed firm in her strong arms. But Elias knew the little trick had only bought them time. Grady would not give up so easily. And out there, beyond the horizon, there were larger forces tracking the footsteps of this towering Apache woman. The shadows were closing in, and the real storm was just beginning. The sound of hoofbeats echoed from afar, at first scattered, then building into a pounding war drum. Elias looked up. On the horizon, a massive dust cloud twisted skyward. Rolling in with a thunderous growl, Samuel whispered hoarsely, "Lord have mercy." A whole Apache war party. Grady and his men froze. Their horses, still shaken from the mud, stamped and fidgeted as more than 30 Apache warriors emerged from the west, tall, formidable figures, their weapons gleaming in the dying sunlight. They rode into town like a steel river, solemn, unstoppable, terrifying. At the front rode a man with streaks of silver in his long hair, a face etched by time, and eyes burning bright, Chief Taza Greyhawk. He raised a ceremonial spear high, his deep voice booming across the street. "Who has harmed the daughter of our tribe? Who dares steal the sacred heirloom of our ancestors?" The townsfolk fell silent. Only the wind stirred, whistling through the porch rafters. Annaba rose swiftly, her eyes blazing. She lifted the wooden box high and stepped out from behind the wagon. Her frame towering, powerful, stood tall like a stone pillar in a dust storm. Taza rode forward, his gaze falling on the bandage at her side, then shifting to Elias. "This man, did he save you?" Annaba nodded firmly, holding the box even closer to her chest. She spoke a long stream of Apache, her voice choked with emotion but filled with pride. Taza listened, his eyes glowing with a deep, unshakable pride. Then he turned to Grady. This wound was no accident. What blade made the cut? And this box it holds not gold, but a copper bracelet and seeds passed down through generations. It is a symbol of our people's right to live and thrive on this land. Who dares call it stolen property? A chorus of war cries rang out as the Apache warriors raised their weapons high. Grady's horse reared, sensing the fury in the air. Sweat beaded across his brow as he fought to keep control. Elias stepped forward, his voice firm as bedrock. "Marshal, your scratched-up hands have betrayed you. No one saw this woman at Copper Creek, but everyone saw her arrive here, wounded. If there is still justice in this town, then you are the one who must answer for your actions." Grady's face turned pale. His hand inched toward his gun, but in an instant, dozens of spears and rifles aimed straight at him. Even Samuel on the porch had his rifle drawn and ready. Grady had men, but now, he stood utterly alone. The moment hung tight, stretched like a bowstring. Dust swirled in the burning red light of the sun, and Elias knew the line between bloodshed and peace was now no wider than the pull of a trigger. Time stood still. The entire town held its breath, the only sound the moaning wind slipping through the porch rafters. Grady remained frozen, his hand hovering over the grip of his gun, but he knew one wrong move, and dozens of Apache spears and rifles would turn him into a forgotten corpse. Taza Greyhawk urged his horse one step closer. His voice rolled like thunder. "This man saved the daughter of our tribe. But you, Grady, you tried to steal the treasure of our ancestors. The laws of white men may protect you, but the laws of earth and blood do not." Grady trembled. His eyes lost focus. He could feel his power crumbling beneath him. Slowly, he lowered his hand from the gun, then dropped to his knees in the dust. His men, seeing their leader broken, one by one let their weapons fall, raising their hands in silent fear. A murmur spread through the townsfolk. Many who had once bowed to Grady's authority now saw his true face. In the blood-red light of dusk, his false power turned to ash. Anaba stepped forward, still clutching the wooden box, her eyes alight. She knelt and opened it for all to see. Inside, there was no gold or silver, only a copper bracelet etched with tribal markings, and a bundle of corn and bean seeds. Small things, yet heavy with the soul of a people. Elias suddenly understood she was not just protecting a box. She was defending the right of her people to exist. Taza turned to Elias and gave him a respectful nod. "Cowboy, you stood between evil and my daughter. You owed us nothing, but from this day on, the honor of the Greyhawk tribe will remember the name Elias Ward." Anaba looked at Elias for a long moment. Then, instead of riding back with the warriors, she stepped closer, placing the wooden box gently at his feet. Her hand touched his arm, and her gaze, softened after so much storm, met his. "Stay." The word came out rough, imperfect but clear. Elias blinked, then nodded slowly. "Then stay you will. Until the wound heals. Until you are ready to go." Samuel chuckled softly and shook his head. "Ward, maybe the Lord didn't send the wrong one after all. Maybe he knew exactly who you needed." The setting sun poured down, turning the stage station into a deep bronze glow. Grady was led away. His men scattered, and Elias stood there, beside the towering Apache woman, not saying a word, but sharing something new, something delicate but stronger than any paper marriage contract. A bond, born not from ink and promise, but from fire, dust, and trust. The sun sank behind the Red Rock Mountains, pouring a mix of blood and honey across the town in the light of dusk. The stage station was quiet now, marked only by deep wagon tracks in the dusty earth and the whistling wind weaving through the sun-bleached porch rafters. Elias stood on the porch, eyes tired but shining. Beside him, Anaba leaned against a wooden post, her wound bandaged, the sacred box resting safely at her side. For the first time since stepping off that stagecoach, her face had softened, no longer wound-tight like a drawn bowstring. Samuel, wiping down his old hunting rifle, sat in a creaky wooden chair and let out a soft chuckle. "Ward, looks like you're not so alone anymore. Sometimes the Lord sends the wrong one, only to make things right." Elias glanced at Anaba. She could not catch all of Samuel's words, but her eyes did. She slowly placed her hand atop the wooden box, then looked at Elias and whispered, her English halting but clear. "You, right man." Elias felt his chest tighten, as if some loose thread within him had finally been pulled snug. He no longer saw himself as a man who had paid for a stranger's photograph. He saw a man who had just earned the trust of a living, beating heart. Out beyond the porch, Marshal Grady had lost all power. Bound and hauled off with his men, he was nothing more than the shadow of a fallen tyrant. The townsfolk murmured, but no one mourned him. When evil is laid bare, it has no place left to hide. Elias looked up at the darkening sky. He thought of all those long winter nights, when only the flicker of lamplight and a photograph of a distant girl had kept him from falling apart. Now, someone entirely different, someone he had never imagined, sat quietly beside him, solid as stone. He spoke softly, with the weathered voice of a cowboy who had seen enough to understand. Some days, the thing that lands on your porch by mistake turns out to be the very gift the Lord meant to send. Not paper, not a contract, but trust, and the courage to accept it. Annaba looked at him, and for the first time, she smiled. Just a small smile, but enough to chase away the loneliness in his soul. Then Elias turned toward the invisible audience of this tale, as if speaking to each of us. Brothers of the frontier, the Wild West teaches us this: happiness does not always arrive the way we expect, but when it knocks, open your door. If you believe in stories of honor and heart in the dust of the West, leave a comment below with the words "Best Wild West Stories" so we know the cowboy spirit still lives on in each of us. Night slowly settled over the town, but on that wooden porch, a new kind of light had been lit stronger than any sunset flame. Once again, it has been an honor to share this story with you. Let me know how it made you feel. Drop a comment below. Type the number 1 if this story spoke to you, and do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more thrilling tales from the wild frontier.